Welcome to the Writing in Your Jammies Podcast. I'm your host, Jeannie Hall, and I'm a creative inspiration coach who helps writers reignite their creative sparks. This podcast is here to help you knock down any barriers that stand between you and your dreams. You can do it. Join me. Hello, and welcome to the Writing in Your Jammies podcast. This is episode 50, 10 Powerful Passages from A Course in Miracles. And welcome again. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate everyone who is listening to this podcast because I am so excited to get to the big 5-0 in my podcasting journey. This has been such a fun and joyful journey, and I am just so happy to be here with you today and sharing this with you. And I decided to make number 50 kind of a special episode just because this whole thing, all the different subjects I've covered have all kind of been leading to the basic spiritual teachings that have really propelled me personally on this spiritual journey that I'm taking. And I'm hoping that if you're on a spiritual journey too, that the information that I share, the different spiritual teachings and philosophies that I share, whether it's law of attraction, whether it's neuro-linguistic programming, whether it is some of the teachings from A Course in Miracles, whatever it is, if this helps you, then I have done my job as a teacher and a coach. So I'm just super appreciative to have you here, and I hope that this information helps you. And I want to give a quick shout out before I get started to Ryan Bidoff, who is one of my mentors. He is a fabulous, fabulous person. He basically globetrots around the world and is able to do so because he changed his life from a 9-to-5 job as a security guard to basically going into business himself, becoming an expert blogger, author, teacher, and he is just such an inspiration to me. And his wife Kelly, as well, as a law of attraction expert, helped me when I was in a really bad place. So I just want to shout out to both of them. I will also link to a previous blog that came out just a few days ago that Ryan gave me, a guest blog, 3 tips on how to develop belief in yourself. So check that out as well. And now I'm going to get back to the show. Okay, so today's topic is 10 powerful passages from A Course in Miracles. And if you're not familiar with this book, I can definitely recommend checking it out. This is one of those books that it's kind of it's like a religious text in the way it looks. It reminds me of a Bible in the way that the book actually is constructed and put together. And it's got like little thin pages like a Bible does. It's kind of got like chapters and almost chapters and verses like the Bible, similar, not exactly the same. But if you're someone like me who I was raised in a Christian tradition, we didn't actually attend church, but I was definitely raised with that belief system and just went to several different churches, went to a Christian college even, and never quite completely agreed with everything I was being taught. And something A Course in Miracles has done for me is kind of fill in the missing pieces that I felt like I was disagreeing with. I remember I would sit in a church service and I'd believe part of it, but part of it I would just be shaking my head going, no, I just don't agree with that, right? And of course, the church is made up of people, and people are humans, and humans are flawed. We are all not perfect in our human forms, even though I do believe that the spiritual version of ourselves is perfect. In this human form, though, we're a little bit more limited, and we can't actually see 100% of the truth 100% of the time. So because of that, that makes for mistakes and errors, and that's part of the learning process. But part of those mistakes and errors can also lead to some very harmful things like hate and prejudice and feeling negative about things and prejudging situations and all that kind of thing. And so what the Course in Miracles has brought to me is another level of clarification, and I hope it does that for you too. So let me just share a few of these. I'm sharing 10 passages today, and I'm just going to share the passage. I invite you to comment and kind of interact with me on these. I would love to know what you think. I'm going to kind of mention what I think these passages mean or what they mean to me personally, but I would love to see how these passages have impacted you if you're already a fan of the Course in Miracles or if you are familiar with it in any way. So the first passage I chose is this one. Miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. The real miracle is the love that inspires them. In this sense, everything that comes from love is a miracle. To me, that passage speaks so truly because I used to think that life just happened to me, and that miracles were only for certain special situations, like I read about Lazarus in the Bible and those sorts of things, and the miracles that Jesus performed and different prominent people in the Bible performed. And it didn't sound like anything that anybody else could do, or if it was possible today, it was so rare. Because you hear about so many frauds, and we've become a very cynical, very jaded society today. And just to know that miracles are expressions of love, and that really you can consider every expression of love that you personally give as a miracle that you're giving someone else, that is just so empowering to me. I just find that to be a tremendous source of strength and comfort, and to know that we are all one of the things that A Course in Miracles put forth is that they call that higher power God, which I tend to as well. I usually either use God or the universe kind of interchangeably, but they use the term God, and they also call humanity the Son of God or man, but they mean everyone whenever they're talking about that. So they consider all of us to be the Son of God. And so we're all connected, we're all divine, we're all made of love, we're all perfect in our spiritual forms, which is not what I was taught. I was taught that we were born into sin. And that felt terrible, quite frankly. And so to be taught something else, to learn another version, and to me, now this is very personal and very subjective, guys, so I understand if you feel differently. But to me, when I started reading A Course in Miracles, so much of it rang true. Things that I would read in the Bible that felt wrong to me or did not resonate. I remember thinking something was wrong with me if I was reading the Bible and felt bad about something, or felt like the killing of firstborns in the Old Testament or whatever, how horrible it's like, how could God be so merciless and so mean? I remember thinking that as a kid and thinking that as an adult. And what I came to believe is much more the Course of Miracles type belief system, which is that God is always there for us. God is always connected to us. God is completely benevolent and loving at all times. So if that resonates with you, I hope that helps you. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that passage. Okay, so the second passage that I want to share, this one's a little bit longer. Heaven and earth shall pass away, and that's in quotes. This means that they will not continue to exist as separate states. My word which is the resurrection and the life, shall not pass away, because life is eternal. You are the work of God, and his work is wholly lovable and wholly loving. This is how a man must think of himself in his heart, because this is what he is. And when I directly applied that very last sentence to all of us and reworded it a little bit, I put, this is how you must think of yourself in your heart, because this is what you are. And this one, again, is just this reaffirmation of God's love for us and his complete loving nature. There is no hatred in him, in that being. I don't even think of him, it's not really about gender. It's just how we refer to that higher being. But I just love this whole thing about this being is all loving at all times. This is not someone who's going to point fingers and judge us. This is not what is the truth, even though that is what I was taught. A Course in Miracles teaches something very different, that God is always on our side and always loving, and anything that might look like judgment is just a lesson we need to learn in staying in a loving state. So I just really found that to be so provocative and so powerful, and it really got me to thinking. And this quote in particular, because life is eternal and that heaven and earth shall pass away, doesn't mean what I've been taught anyway. I know most of us have been taught, oh, that means the world's going to end. Well, I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but whatever happens, we are eternal beings, is what I took from that. And at one point, they will reconnect. The spiritual realm and this earthly human realm will reconnect. Right now they're separate, but they won't always be. That just kind of blew my mind. So I would love to know what you think of that one as well. My third passage that I chose, error cannot really threaten truth, which can always withstand it. Only the error is actually vulnerable. You are free to establish your kingdom where you see fit, but the right choice is inevitable if you remember this. Spirit is in a state of grace forever. Your reality is only spirit. Therefore, you are in a state of grace forever. And the thing that I took from this third passage so much was that no matter what decisions we make, which we can always make our own decisions, free will is the absolute truth, that we always have the choice to do whatever we will. That is something that was gifted to us from that higher being, God, the universe, and that we might make errors, but it never changes the truth. The truth will always be the truth, and we feel that in our gut. We feel that in our heart. If we allow ourselves to pay attention to that, we can always know the truth. And I just love that. Basically, that the whole sin idea doesn't ever really affect whether or not we're good people. I think that's what really tripped me up with Christianity, is the idea that sin is something we can't avoid, and it's something we all do and that we're born into. I remember feeling that was really wrong, at least for me personally. That struck me as so wrong. And to hear this way of thinking, that we're in a state of grace no matter what, because we're spirit. We might be inhabiting these human bodies for right now, but what we really are is spirit. And in that way, any errors that we make are never going to be held against us, right? They're just learning experiences. And we ask for those learning experiences when we ask to come into these human forms. So I love that one. I just love that we are free from sin and we're free from judgment, and that any errors that we make are completely forgivable, and they don't really ever impact the truth of who we really are and what God really is. I just found that so powerful. The fourth passage, darkness is a lack of light, as sin is lack of love. It has no unique properties of its own. It is an example of the scarcity belief from which only error can proceed. Truth is always abundant. So again, more talk about that truth, that inherent truth that's within all of us. And I also love the talk about the difference between scarcity, which is always an error, and abundance. Because in this way, it didn't really strike me as abundance as being like money and possessions and that kind of abundance, but that scarcity is just that feeling of lack. And that's never the truth. We are never without anything that we really need. And if we feel that we are, we have created that feeling, and it is an error, and it is not really true. And it's taken me a long time to wrap my head around that concept, that abundance is always the truth, that we are never without whatever we need, wisdom, knowledge, resources. We are never without that as long as we allow ourselves to have it. And that if we don't have it or feel like we don't have it, it's because we created that in our life ourselves. We have blocked it ourselves. And the trick is to unblock it. So I would love to hear your take on that one as well. So, number 5, the fifth passage. When you are afraid of anything, you are acknowledging its power to hurt you. Remember that where your heart is, there is your treasure also. You believe in what you value. If you are afraid, you are valuing wrongly. So this one, fear is such a huge part of human life. So many of us create so many problems in our lives because we are fearful of various situations. We're fearful. We're fearful to leave a job because we're fearful to lose that pay, because we're fearful of losing our house or where we're living or our car or our possessions. Fear. And this just is a reminder that fear is valuing things wrongly. That the truth is always abundance. And that's what we need to focus on. And if we're afraid, then we're giving it power. We're giving lack and scarcity the power that we should be giving love and trust in abundance. So that's how I took that passage. How did you take that one? What do you think? Passage 6, the sixth one says, reality can dawn only on an unclouded mind. It is always there to be accepted, but its acceptance depends on your willingness to have it. So to me, this is talking about the power of our minds. And if I was to tell you a story of 2 little girls, one grew up in a family that had a lot of money problems. They moved from one state to halfway across the country to another state, thinking that that would be the best thing to do. But once they got there, the jobs were scarce and they nearly starved that first winter they were in that state. And they ended up really struggling to feed their kids. And the little girl who's growing up in this family remembers having only fried squash to eat for every meal for quite a while. And she went to school and was bullied and was picked on and never felt like she was fitting in. And then when she got as she got to be a teenager, she thought she found a group of friends that she would fit in with and that she could be happy as being a part of their group. But they betrayed her and they rejected her, and she was devastated and ended up kind of having a lot of self-confidence issues later on in her life. To deal with those self-confidence issues, she began to overeat and kept eating until she was about 80 pounds overweight and stayed that way until she became ill. Now that's the story of one little girl. This other little girl, she grew up in a family that was full of life and laughter and trips to Disneyland and trips to the ocean. And she always felt loved. She had wonderful time playing outside with her sister and her cousins and her neighbors. And she always enjoyed life. And as she got older, she fell in love with the boy when she was actually quite young, and went on to marry him and had a beautiful marriage and a happy, happy life. Now, what if I was to tell you these two little girls were not separate? If I was to tell you that was the story of the same little girl, I just told you the story of the same exact person. Because I did. It's the same person. So it's all in how we look at life, and all in how we interpret the events of our life and what happens to us in our lives and what happens for us in our life. You can pick out the bad things that have happened to you and make that who you are, or you can pick out the good things that have happened to you and make that who you are. It's totally up to you. But it's really important to have a mind that is willing to see things, be open to these things, and be willing to accept what God is trying to show us, right? And be willing to accept that we can always know the truth. We can always see reality for what it is if we're willing to keep our minds clear and connected to the divine. So the seventh passage I want to share. You cannot see the invisible, yet if you see its effects, you know it must be there. By perceiving what it does, you recognize its being, and by what it does, you learn what it is. You cannot see your strengths, but you gain confidence in their existence as they enable you to act. And the results of your actions you can see. To me, this is just the fundamental belief system of humanity. Whether or not you believe we're here all on our own or not, is probably this very passage. Because a lot of people will not believe in anything they cannot see for themselves. And yet this passage makes the point, but you see the effects. You can witness the results and measure those results. And by that result, you know that whatever it is, that invisible thing you can't see, you know it exists. You may not know what it is, but you know that something exists to cause that action, to cause that result, right? And we can make arguments all day long. People who believe in the divine and in a higher power in God and in the universe, in the Bible, and of course in miracles, you can make the argument that those things exist. And for people who believe it, you're probably never going to dissuade them. Like, I believe I've just had this feeling my entire life that I've been guided and led, and that there are things outside of my five senses that I might not be able to explain, but I believe in them. In my heart of hearts, I believe in the truth of that that's a benevolent, loving being watching out for me. And there are people out there, though, that no matter what evidence you could provide to them, they're never going to believe that there's a God or that there's anything outside of this visible world. You might try and convince them, but they won't see it unless they choose to see it. It's a decision. It's free will. So whether or not people believe or not is up to them. The 8th passage is, in this world you can become a spotless mirror in which the holiness of your Creator shines forth from you to all around you. You can reflect heaven here. This one is very important to me personally because the work that I have decided to embark upon is the work of helping others and becoming a coach and guiding others along their own spiritual journeys and helping writers to find inspiration and creativity and just anyone who is struggling in that area, anyone who wants a better life or better results in their life, to be able to help them to find those results, to help people to figure out how to be happier and to be more successful in their lives is a gift that I'm looking to fulfill and that I am reaching toward with every breath I take, basically. So this is so inspirational to me that we can be mirrors to reflect heaven as human individuals right here to all those masses of humanity that are suffering or going through difficulty, that we can be a mirror to reflect heaven and to be inspirations to others and to help others in every way we possibly can. I think that's just an affirmation of what I'm hoping to do. I think it's a message directly from God that I'm doing the right thing. That's just the way I see it, but I would love to know how you see it too. The 9th passage. Make way for peace, and it will come. For understanding is in you, and from it peace must come. I love the idea that we are peaceful beings to begin with, and that anything that's not peace and happiness is kind of a lie, that we can see it that way, and that we can release it and forgive it and move forward and ultimately attain that peace within ourselves individually. And the more of us who do that, the more likely it is that this world will find that peace on a global scale. I believe in that. It's very important to me to believe that this earthly plane is capable of peace, which I really think it is, because that's our natural state, right? That is what we naturally are inside, is peaceful and happy. And whatever has come along to change that, we can change it back or change it into something altogether different that is still peaceful and happy and loving. How inspirational is that for the world, right? Okay, the last passage I have to share is a little bit longer, but please bear with me. I think it's important. The 10th passage. Fear is not of the present, but only of the past and future, which do not exist. There is no fear in the present when each instant stands clear and separated from the past, without its shadow reaching out into the future. Each instant is a clean, untarnished birth in which the Son of God emerges from the past into the present. And the present extends forever. It is so beautiful and so clean and free of guilt that nothing but happiness is there. No darkness is remembered, and immortality and joy are now. I've actually had several of my mentors share the concept that the only reality is right now, that the present is all that really exists. And here it is confirmed in A Course in Miracles, that the past is not real And the argument for that is that if you ask two people from the same family about an incident that happened in their past, they're probably going to give you two different stories. They're going to be slightly different or maybe vastly different because of their own perspective in the situation. So it could be argued that all the past is a memory, and memory is not perfect. So maybe that's why it doesn't really exist, or it exists as we want it to. We put our own personal spin on it, right? But the present, what's happening right now in this second, if we're looking up from our phones long enough to be aware of it, that's reality. That's where real change happens. Because the future hasn't happened yet, so it doesn't exist. We have hopes and plans for the future, but it doesn't exist yet. The present is where all change exists. The present is where we make all of our decisions. The present is where we decide if we are going to go about being loving or live in fear. The present is when we decide on whether or not we're going to live a life of scarcity and want and fear and doubt and hatred and betrayal, or whether or not we're going to live the best way we can, and that we're going to spread love and enlightenment and wisdom and joy, compassion, and not only for everyone else, but for ourselves. It's got to be to yourself first that you give those good things, right? Because you can't give it if you don't feel it for yourself. Not for long anyway. So the present is the only thing that actually exists. And from that present state, you can then work your miracles. You can change whatever you want. Make whatever decision you want. Because we fear the consequences of our decisions. But we don't actually know what the consequence will be because it doesn't exist yet. We might think we do. We might say, well, if I do this, I'm going to have this happen. And you might be right, but you might be wrong. I mean, I don't advise driving like a maniac and running into cars because you're going to have a consequence. We have seen a lot of proof of that, but it hasn't happened yet. I just don't recommend that. But as far as something else, like something we want to do, but we're scared to do because we think we might fail or we think we're not strong enough, we have all the strength of God behind us. If we feel like we're lonely, we are completely connected to every other individual, not only on this planet, but in the universe on a spiritual level. Not to mention God himself, or the universe itself, or the goddess, or whatever you want to call it. It's all connected. We are all connected in this present moment. And this present moment is the only thing that truly exists. Isn't that an amazing concept? So, A Course in Miracles has been part of what has changed my life for the better and set me on a much more positive path. And I hope it has worked that way for you too. Again, I would love for you to share your own favorite passages and for you to comment on what I've shared, and let's have a conversation about this. I think this book is so influential and so powerful, and I would love to get your take on it too. So fill in the comments, send me emails at jeannie@writinginyourjammies.com if you'd like. Connect with me on Facebook. We can have a discussion over in facebook.com/writinginyourjammies. I would love to get a conversation really going about this topic. I just think it's really fascinating. And for those of you who have been listening to me for a while, thank you so much for making my podcast possible and for being so helpful to me. I think every single listen is a joy and a reaffirmation that what I'm doing is right. So thank you so much for that. And I send every kind of love I can your way and every blessing, and wish you joy and beauty and all good things. So take care. Have a gorgeous day, week, month, and year. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening to the Writing in Your Jammies podcast. I appreciate every download and every person who has subscribed. I release new episodes every Wednesday and Saturday, so if you enjoy this content, please consider leaving a review. The more reviews fledgling shows like mine receive, the more visible it becomes on the various podcast stations. Each review helps, so if you enjoy what I've been sharing, please help others find this show by leaving a brief review. Thanks again for listening.